From the shores of the Baltic Sea to the shores of the Black Sea, the Slavs revered a variety of gods for more than 600 years. Slavic folklore depicted the beliefs and world interpretations of the ancient Slavs, whose paganism elements can be traced back to the period between the 8th and 13th centuries. The myths and ceremonial practices live on right up till the present time, in antique relics of the ancient pagan conviction, folktales, legends, and customs of the Slavic folkloric tradition. In spite of the fact that there is few tributes or archaeological discoveries that have uncovered insights concerning the hallowed existence of the ancient Slavic people, there are historical records that have compounded and saved a liberal measure of data with amazing discoveries. Numerous history specialists of Slavic convictions have relied upon sources from various disciplines to accumulate data in regards to the matter. Their discoveries have documented anecdotes about human penances, multi-headed idols, horse divination, and stories about Slavic cosmogony, and gods that mirror a common Indo-European past with Romans, Greeks, and Scandinavians. The Slavic people had several major divine beings joined by various lesser divinities exemplified in demons, spirits, and lesser gods. The ancient Slavic society beliefs depended on the possibility that the world was a beneficial interaction of oppositional and integral dualities that were communicated by the preeminent heavenly being. With that in mind, let's delve into the ancient Slavic people's most significant divine beings on this new chapter, Slavic mythology. Stvarog was a Slavic creator deity who ruled over all aspects of creation, including the spirits of the dead. The name Stvarog is derived from the Sanskrit word, Svarg, which implies paradise. As the name proposes, Stvarog directed the skies, and ruled over every single Slavic divinity. He is the Slavic equivalent to Hephaestus, the Greek god of crafts and fire. Stvarog was venerated by the Slavs during their transition into the Iron Age. Different Slavic clans considered Stvarog to be a hero of mechanical headways, and he was believed to have created the universe with his hammer. Stvarog presided over the Blue Svarga, a spot in paradise where the diseased spirits lived. This was a significant place for the Slavs, and it was believed that the stars inside the Blue Svarga were eyes of the ancestors who looked upon the Slavic people. Stvarog was revered all through ancient Slavdom, and historians have discovered a few sanctuaries and sanctums built in his honor. The South Slavs didn't revere Stvarog straightforwardly, however, they venerated his son Dažbog, the god of the sun. In any case, his ubiquity was before long reduced by the Russian Vikings, who uprooted the cult and worship of Stvarog. Albeit a significant number of his legends have eroded with the progression of time, contemporary societies have ignited a new interest and revival of the god. In Slavic folklore, Perun was an incomparable divinity, of which was the lord of lightning and storm, who claimed the sky and was the patron of warriors. Perun was a pagan champion of paradise, and supporter defender of heroes. He is said to have ridden frantically with a chariot of fire across the sky drawn by a goat, and rebuffed his foes with lightning bolts. Perun is most essentially attached to a creation myth, in which he fights Veles, the Slavic lord of the underworld, for the assurance of his significant other Mokosh, the goddess of summer, and the atmospheric water. Just as for the control of the universe, as the deliverer of the atmospheric water, he was revered as a god of agriculture and bulls. Perun is depicted as a vigorous red-bearded man with an impressive height, with silver hair and a golden moustache. He conveys a mallet, a war axe, or a bow which he shoots electrical discharges. He is associated with oxen and represented by a sacred tree, the mighty oak. In delineations of his essential legend, he is pictured as an eagle sitting in the top parts of the tree, with his adversary and fight rival, the mythical beast Veles, twisted around its roots. Perun is associated with Thursday, as the Slavic word for Thursday, Perenden, signifies Perun's day. Morana was the Slavic goddess of winter and death. As the goddess of winter, she was never popular among the old Slavs, which is understandable if we have in mind the climate in which they used to live. Morana was considered to be a long and cold winter, a winter that could bring death through famine and extreme cold, furthermore, could cause disease and massive death of the cattle. Her arrival was therefore always expected with fear, and her departure was celebrated with a lot of noise and cheer. Her complete opposite was goddess Vesna, whom the people used to welcome with festivals and jubilation, at the same time joyfully witnessing the departure of Morana, the winter. Numerous rituals were connected with seeing Morana off. People would most frequently make a doll representing this goddess, and then ritually destroy it. They made the doll from straw or switches, and then beat it with their cultivators. After that, they either threw it into the water or burned it. There was another ritual related to Morana, that was performed in the month of March. That was the so-called Maka, when a masked group of people used to gather in order to scare Morana and drive her away. In Morana, we have an example of how our ancestors worshipped even something that did not bring them good. but rather made them scared and terrified. Dažbog was the Slavic god of the sun, a role that is common to numerous Indo-European individuals, and there is adequate proof that there was a sun cult in the pre-Christian clans of focal Europe. Dažbog is said to be the child of the sky god Stvarog, and the sibling to Stvarog, the god of fire. His name signifies day god, or giving god, to various scholars. The word bog is for the most part acknowledged to signify God. However, Daž signifies either day or giving. The primary tale about Dažbog is that he resided in the east, in a land of everlasting summer and plenty, in a palace made of gold. The morning and evening auroras, known collectively as Zoraya, were Dažbog's daughters. In the morning, Zoraya opened the palace's gates to allow Dažbog to leave the royal residence and start his day-by-day venture across the sky. In the evening, Zoraya would close the gates after the sun god had returned and completed his day's journey. Dažbog is said to ride across the sky in a brilliant chariot drawn by fire-breathing stallions who are white, gold or silver. In certain stories, the stallions are resilient and white with brilliant wings, and daylight comes from the solar fire shield Dažbog consistently conveys with him. At night, Dažbog meanders the sky from east to west, crossing the extraordinary sea with a boat pulled by geese, wild ducks, and swans. In certain stories, Dažbog starts the beginning of the day as a youthful tough man, yet by the evening, he is a red-faced bloated elderly gentleman. He represents fertility, male power, and in the tune of Igor's mission, he is referenced as the grandfather of the Slavs. Belobog, also called Belbog and Belun, is the white god, the divine power of heaven and the carrier of good luck and joy, heavenly light, sunlight, warmth and harmony. He rejects evil and rewards kindness. Typically, he is portrayed as a savvy elderly man with a staff, a long beard, wearing a white robe, and only appearing during the day. His counterpart Chernobog is the dark god, the lord of night and hell, chaos, evil and darkness. Chernobog brings insidious karma and represents the principles of darkness, evil, and turmoil. Chernobog was once rejected and fled from his reality into the dark universes for violating the unique, heavenly laws. Due to their conflicting arrangements, Belobog and Chernobog engage in an endless war, in which their standards clash with each other for all eternity. The ancient Slavs feared misfortune through illness, extreme cold, famine, poverty, bad luck, curse, and believed it all stemmed from Chernobog, a frightening creature surrounded by darkness. The ancient Slavs believed that the gods were responsible for good and bad events in people's lives on earth. For this reason, illnesses, death, famine and other misfortunes were believed to be of divine origin and sent by the gods for a purpose. Among the numerous Slavic myths, there is a creation myth, which says that these two divine beings created the world together, and this was their great creation. However, during the creation cycle, Belobog and his abhorrent counterpart Chernobog conflicted with one another, to the extent that they made the world look as it does today. The Slavic horned lord, Veles, ruled over the underworld, wilderness, animals, plants, and forests, and was associated with dragons, cattle, magic, musicians, wealth and trickery. He was imagined to be a serpentine, with horns, of bull, ram, or some other domesticated herbivore, and a long beard. He has many associations with wealth and the magical forces of the spirit world. The character of Veles is very complex, and is likened to that of the Celtic Cernunnos, or the Greek Pan. Along with many cultures, the ancient Slavs viewed their world as a huge tree, with the treetop and branches representing the heavenly abode of gods and the world of mortals, whilst the roots represented the underworld. Veles was often seen as a huge serpent coiling around the roots of the world tree, ruling the world of the dead. This god was Perun's enemy, and they were often at war, because Veles was a devious and mischievous god who often stole Perun's son, wife, cattle, or whatever he could find. This theft resulted in attacks from Perun, who threw lightning bolts into the valley where Veles lived. Luckily for Veles, he could transform into a tree, an animal, or even a person to protect himself. There is a legend that the war between Veles and Perun was actually the immortal war between earth and the sky, given that Veles is on earth and Perun in the sky. Although Perun wins every battle, Veles always manages to reappear. Vesna, the Slavic parallel to the Greek goddess Persephone, also known as Zhivana, Ziva, Shiva, Diva, Deva, Devika, or Danica, is the goddess of spring, youth and life. Her existence is entwined with her diametrically opposite Morana, the goddess of winter and death. They are the forces that represent the change of seasons and keep the ancient Slavic world spinning in a cycle of death and rebirth. Vesna is quite possibly the most adored goddess among the Slavs due to her beauty and abundance. Her arrival signifies the ending of Morana's cold and savage rule, imperfect by starvation, disease, and death. Slavs, particularly southern Slavs, name their daughters after the goddess Vesna, believing that they will be just as generous and blissful as the goddess herself. Vesna is portrayed as a beautiful young lady, with a perfect smile, long hair and rosy cheeks, generally wearing a white dress beautified with wreaths and blossoms. There is an especially large wreath around her waist that represents fertility. It was believed that Vesna had the ability to re-establish well-being and normal equilibrium, which would bring about an amicable and fertile life. There are various prayers and ceremonies that are performed to bring the spring goddess and force the malicious winter out of the home, such as children playing with the pussy willow catkins and making bellflower wreaths. Eggs were painted red, representing the sun and the warmth brought by Vesna. Girls adorned with flower wreaths and leaves would sing songs to the goddess. And birds returning from their winter migrations were sometimes equated with Vesna's arrival on the wings of Stvarog's wind. Vesna, with her everlasting youth and effervescence for life, makes the world sweet, youthful, innocent, and beautiful. While it's not wrong to call her the goddess of spring, the correct description is that she is the goddess of youth and rebirth. Mokosh, also called Mokosh, was worshipped by the ancient Slavs as the goddess of the earth and fertility. Mokosh is the goddess who gives and takes life, spinner of the thread of life, giver of the water of life, fertility, and health in marriage. She is most likely a later and more strongly personified variant of the Slavs' elder earth goddess, the damp Mother Earth goddess. Mokosh assumed a broad range of divine roles, however, she was first and foremost a symbol of the earth's fertility. During the early spring, it was taboo to spit on, or strike the ground, since Mokosh was said to be pregnant that time of year. Festivals were dedicated to her in the autumn, after the harvest. The belief that Mokosh blessed the earth with divinity was reflected in peasant practices that in some parts of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus persisted into the 19th century, which consisted of the swallowing of a lump of soil to consecrate wedding vows, the placing of earth upon one's head to seal oaths, and the confession of one's sins to a hole in the ground instead of a priest. Over time, Mokosh became a patron of women, especially those bearing children or giving birth. She oversaw women's work, such as spinning and weaving. She was also thought to protect flocks of sheep. The strength of her cult remained substantial, even after the Christianization of the Slavs. In northern Russia, she has survived as a house spirit known as Mokosh, or Mokosh, who was personified as a tall woman with a large head and long arms. There is a particular link between Mokosh and the Sage, who were the givers of judgment or sentence. Mokosh would spin her spinning wheel and string together to make the cloth of the Sudbina, which was the judgment cloth. Some stories tell us that as humans walked the earth and they transgressed, treating the earth with no respect or consideration, their fate was set. However, if humanity was kind to nature, treasured the livestock they kept, and valued the rivers and the forests, even if they transgressed, the weaving cloth would record everything, which would change their ultimate fate. Mokosh would weave the future judgment of all humans. However, as Mokosh was a benevolent divine being, she would also come to help them find their way before the Sage came to collect the final threads of every person's cloth. In many folk tales, she is the wife of Perun and mother of Morana, Devana and Jirilo. As is true in many countries where Reconstructionist paganism is blossoming, there is currently a significant revival of pre-Christian spirituality and folk traditions in the lands that were formerly dominated by the Soviet Union. Hence, her presence is being remembered and honored openly once more. Triglav, the three-headed god in Slavic mythology, is a composition and a representative of three supreme Slavic gods. These gods were present in several Slavic tribes throughout Eastern Europe. In Kiev, Triglav was a collective of three divine beings, which were Perun, Dažbog and Stvarog. However, Triglav was most commonly composed by Stvarog, the creator, Perun, the god of the heavens, and Svetovid, the holy visionary, or sometimes Veles, the god of the earth and underworld. The avatar of the three-headed god depicts a man, who sometimes has a golden blindfold over his eyes, and occasionally his lips. The reason why he wore golden bindings over his eyes and lips was so that he could not see the sins of the people, or speak about them. The Czechs typically depicted Triglav as a goat with three heads, who represented strength and tenancy. In some Slavic regions, Triglav was the local deity worshipped as a protector from war, which was typically portrayed riding a black divination horse, while holding a spear in one hand and a horn in the other. The southern Slavs of Slovenia and Serbia named a mountain range Triglav, out of appreciation for the god. According to historical records of Ebo's writings, the ancient Slavic people believed that Triglav had three heads because he ruled the three kingdoms of the earth. Those kingdoms were life on earth as the present, the sky as the future, and the underworld as the kingdom of the dead or the past.